Hey guys, Fossmith here, coming to you with another video today. And this is the third time I'm recording this video. The first time the audio was too low because I was using a non-standard mic. The second time I did a Zach from Diversity in Comics and I forgot to press record. And here we are. So what I wanted to talk about today is a video that was actually put out by Comics by Perch. Comics by Perch is a channel like Diversity in Comics, aka Comics Matter, or just some guy, where he goes into the nuts and bolts of the American comic book industry. And he has some really good points a lot of the time, most of the time, actually. And he knows his stuff because I believe he used to own a comic book store if he doesn't currently own a comic book store. And the topic of this video that he did was, is the recent success of manga short term or long term? Um, it's a question, but it's a very open ended question because recent is relevant. Does he mean the last 5 years? Does he mean the last 10 years? Does he mean the last 20 years? You know, I'm in my 40s. I was born in the 1970s in California, so the last 20 years seems fairly recent to me. Um, Long term and short term, what does he mean by that? But the reason why he was bringing this up was because a Marvel comic book artist, Brett Booth, posted the question on Twitter asking, what sets manga apart from American comics? Why is it so much popular even in America? And Comics Perch went through a laundry list of the reasons why he thought manga is doing so well right now. And I agree with a lot of what he said. He mentioned how it's a finite story, it's not rebooted all the time ad nauseum, and the team that's making a manga, usually it's a one person with a couple assistants and an editor. And so there's some consistency. Now, I tried to get into American comics back in the 80s because I had two or three friends that were into it when I was in elementary school or junior high school. Yeah, that's middle school back then. And full disclosure, I could never really get into it. I don't want to be that disparaging, but say, for example, like Jim Lee, who was probably the most popular artist at that time. I cannot get over the way he drew faces, especially Asian women faces, like Psylocke. It really, really bugged me. And the selling point of American superhero comics is supposed to be the action, but I found the action to be very stiff and non-dynamic, and I just cannot get into it. This is a opinion statement. Your mileage may vary. So, conversely, I always liked manga. When I was young, I did not speak or read Japanese, so I had to get a friend that did to help me read these stories. But I started off with manga that was aimed at children, like from a comic Bonbon. Comics like Plummo Kyoshiro, which is a comic about a guy that makes Gundam plastic models. And they're scanned into a computer system that turns them into virtual fighting machines. This is in 1984, so this is way before topics like or ideas like this were mainstream. So it just blew my mind when I saw that. And from there, I progressed on to the typical shonen jump fare of the time, like Dragon Ball or Yu Yu Hakusho, Fist of the North Star, Saint Seiya. And as I got a little bit older, elementary school, fifth, sixth grade, junior high school, I got into like Rama and a lot of other Shonen Sunday comics. Now, going back to the topic at hand, I postulate that the reason why manga is doing a lot better than American comics specifically worldwide right now is probably due in large part to the system that creates manga. you have a very top-heavy publisher system where the level of quality that's expected out of 16 pages every week is very heavily monitored. And what I mean by this is there's two things in play. One is the editors are very Spartan. A famous story is Tetsuro Hara, the artist for Fist of the North Star. He submitted his 16 pages for a specific week once, and his editor, who happened to be the same person that was editing Akira Toriyama at the time on Dragon Ball, took 3 or 4 pages out of those 16 pages and tore them up in front of him, and told him to redraw them on the spot. So if you know Fist of the North Star, you know it's a fairly detail-oriented manga, and it takes a lot of time and effort to create even a single page. A lot of cross-hatching, a lot of detail. So Tetsuo Hara, half delirious from lack of sleep, redrew those 4 pages, crying there in the middle of Shueisha, which is a publisher, Jump Comics. Now, I don't suggest this is good for everybody, nor that it's something that should be looked up to. But unfortunately, as the meme goes, this is peak performance. I.e., if you want something that's going to endear, that's going to endure and endear the readers to the story, you have to give it your all. It goes back to my previous video of Rimiko Takahashi only sleeping 3 hours a day. Unfortunately, we don't have the time as manga artists to engage in too many creature comforts, especially if you're working on a weekly comic. On top of this, you have the reader survey system, the reader polling system, where the reader is asked to fill out a form and mail it back to the publisher or email it back to the publisher. And in exchange for the chance of winning some prizes like a PlayStation 5 or a Switch or some plastic models or something else, as part of a raffle, they ask you to rate the comics in that week's issue of Shonen Jump or Shonen Magazine or Shonen Sunday. Rate them 1 through 13 or 14, whatever the number may be, and explain what you liked the most about the comics that were in that magazine that week and what you liked the least about it. And if you're consistently ranked at the bottom, especially in Shonen Jump, for 3 or 4 weeks, they will cut you. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what your prior successes were. They will say, look, this isn't working right now. We need to wrap this up. It's severe, but it's the system that's in place. Now, you might be wondering why I'm on a screenshot of a web page of this Japanese television series. This series is called Dragon Sakura. And the reason why I'm on this is because it dovetails into my next point about manga, which is you have these shonen comics that sell exorbitant numbers of trade paperbacks every time they come out. Demon Slayer or Jujutsu Kaisen or Tokyo Ghoul. They'll sell millions upon millions in a matter of weeks. But at the same time, these publishers like Shueisha, they have comics that are oriented towards adults. And these comics are not adult comics in the sense that they feature explicit material or quote-unquote adult comics in the American sense, where it's like Frank Miller or that's the only thing that comes up, Neil Gaiman, where the subject matter is dark. It's adult in the sense that it's a mature topic handled maturely. So Dragon Sakura is a TV series that's on air right now. It's the second series. The first series was aired back in 2008, I want to say. And the equivalent of the Nielsen ratings in this country, they had Dragon Sakura have they monitored that it was having a 20% household viewing share, which means 20% of Japanese households saw this drama. What's 20% of 130 million people? I'm Asian, but I'm terrible at math. Let's see, half is 65. Half of that is 32-ish. 10% of that is minus 3, so it's 27 million people tuning into a television series that was based off of a manga. And this manga is about a lawyer turned special advisor teacher for a high school that was failing. And he created a curriculum so that high school, which was on the verge of going bankrupt because it was a private school, was to have a couple graduates pass essentially their SAT exam and get into the most prestigious university in Japan, which is Tokyo University. It would be the equivalent of like a high school in Compton having 4 or 5 students get into Harvard. It doesn't happen, but that's the crux of the story. Now, there's no real fighting. There's no the educational background isn't a setup for something else. The story is the process of the education itself, which is something you will not see in a Western comic, or excuse me, maybe a French or German comic, but you will not see that in an American comic. Imagine a popular writer right now at Marvel. I don't know, Hickman, or what's the name of the crackhead that did Venom? Donny Cates. Imagine Donny Cates going to C.B. Cebulski, aka Akira Yoshida, and telling him, hey, I want to write a comic about an urban inner city school where a teacher comes in and teaches them, the stand and deliver type scenario. C.B. Cebulski will probably say, okay, so how do superheroes figure into this? And Donny Cates says, well, they don't. He will be told, no, you can't do that. It'll be a waste of resources and time and money for Disney. And there's no way to parlay this into a tentpole big budget movie. It's not an enviable position to be in. Your hands are tied. You don't have that much freedom. Of course, if you were to do this the independent route, there's lots of ways of possibly making this happen. But even independent comics in America, they involve crime or fantasy, some sort of violent aspect to it. Whereas mainstream adult-oriented comics in Japan could be about education, they could be about food, they could be about lawyers, they could be... One popular comic called Dr. Stork is about what happens when people have a miscarriage. The main character is a OBGYN. So I think what I'm getting at here is that you have your core competencies of all these shonen comics, action comics from Jump or Magazine or Sunday that sell a lot. And on top of that, you have these other lesser known genres, at least for Americans, that are bolstering the entire bulwark from the sides. And I believe this is what gives manga the versatility in order to succeed in a lot of markets. It's the equivalent of diversifying your portfolio. Well, that's it from today. Tell me what you think. I may be completely off base when it comes to my assessment of American comics because I'm an outsider looking in. Not a fan. I don't read him, so I might be completely wrong. But please tell me what you think in the comments if you feel so inclined. If you like this kind of content and you want to see more, please hit like and subscribe. This is Fosmith. Peace!